So we're here with the Public Choice Award nominees. We have Fabrizio, Michelino, Amelia and Mark. And does the shark have a name?
Jaws Dundee.
Okay.
Wait, you get the reference, right?
I do.
Good.
I do.
Certain generations, younger generations, not look at anyone, do not.
Amelia, Mr. Malcolm's List. I mean, it was a short film initially, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So how did you get involved in the project?
I think it was just, I think my agent put me forward for it, and then I think then it was a smaller list, and I met the director, and we went for a really lovely walk in Hyde Park, and we talked, and then I came up with a couple of, I think with a theme for her, and then we went from there. So
your music is in the film, isn't it? So you had to compose it in advance.
I did, yeah, which was actually great because it kind of got me in there quite early. So there was a big ballroom dance scene, and they needed the love theme to be written for that because they wanted them to dance to that. So I did that probably kind of 9 months before I did anything else. But it was good because it was kind of having that in the bag, having that feeling going into the job of, okay, well, we've got one theme and that's kind of bedded in already. It was a really nice starting point.
And were you there when they shot the ballroom scene with your music?
No, I wasn't. I was actually in Australia at the time, but I would have loved to have been there. But it was they shot during kind of COVID or just after, so I wouldn't have been allowed to be there anyway. It was really restricted at that time.
And in terms of the approach for the music, it's described as a contemporary classical score. So what instruments did you use? Were you inspired by anything in particular? What did the director, is Emily, isn't it?
Emma,
yeah. What did she say to you about what she wanted from the film?
I think she wanted the film to feel very classic and to be kind of bedded into something quite, traditional. But then she also was like, I don't want it to be boring and I want it to feel modern. So I think I tried to use the orchestra in quite a traditional way, but I tried to find more hooky kind of melodies and more catchy themes. And then I predominantly used woodwind as my kind of main colour, because I felt that was a good way of, it's just so expressive and it's got such a warmth, and I didn't want the film to feel too kind of buttoned up and icy, so I used woodwind in a kind of playful, fun way, I think.
So obviously it was a blank canvas when you came on board to compose. How often is that the case? Do you often get temp music?
I mean, it wasn't blank, there was temp. By the time I came back on, there was temp, yeah. I mean, they used my theme for the dance, but then, so no, it wasn't a blank slate, and I don't think I've ever had that experience. I think there's always been some form of temp there. And
what about you, Mark? Have you experienced that situation with temp music? If you teach
all too
films,
often.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's good in terms of having an exact reference for where your music should be and what the feeling of the music should be, but many composers encounter the phenomenon known as temp love, and we do not love it. The director loves the temp, and they might say, make it more like the temp, make it more like the temp. And that may have happened a little bit in The Reef Stalked, but we got through it.
Or they don't do that and they actually say, I'm not in love with the temp.
Which means they're in love with the temp. Yeah.
And then they keep going, but it just works so well. Just watch the temp again, it works really well. I'm like, I thought you didn't like the temp.
I mean, the last scene in The Reef Stalked was temped with Hans Zimmer, a cue from Interstellar. So that's why there's organ in there. All similarities ended there.
So I was going to ask you, because you co-wrote a song about Sinead O'Connor.
I did.
Who sadly passed. What was that experience like working with Sinead?
It was wonderful. Like, she was so brilliant and kind and generous, and I wrote the song and didn't know who they were going to get to sing it, and then I remember the music supervisor called and said, Sinead's listened to the song and she's going to do it, and she just wants to have a conversation with you. And so I called her, we had a really lovely conversation. She was so kind. She had a couple of little tweaks that she wanted to do. I was like, absolutely. And yeah, she was just really gracious and and her vocal was incredible. So I feel really lucky to have crossed paths with her.
So talking to some of the composers earlier, there's sort of two schools of thought. One, you'd love to be involved at script stage, and then the other one is fast and furious. So you've got a couple, so they can't change your, you've got an idea, you go with it. Have you been in those situations? Which one would you prefer?
It is nice when you get involved early. And in fact, my regular horror film collaborator, Chris Sun, the first film I did with him, I did read the script and I did a bunch of piano sketches, and I did 5, and one of them, he was like, oh, I like that. And it became the main theme for the trailer and the film itself. So sadly, that's the only time it's happened. So I say the earlier the better, if possible.
What about you, Amelia?
Just not always.
I always like the idea of being on early, and I think there are benefits for sure. But I think for me, it's really when you have the engagement. So whether some directors are really able to engage with music early on, and they like to, and some just aren't ready. So it's kind of I think you just want to make sure that you're having your kind of most creative peak at the point where you have full engagement from the filmmakers, rather than having to kind of do this through months and months and months. I remember someone saying to me that directors are like lighthouses. They have that single beam of light. So you want to make sure when it's on you that you're ready to go and you're in good flow. So sometimes I can find that is harder when people just aren't quite ready, and you feel like you're maybe, sorry, could you maybe just listen to this idea that I had? And whereas when you're fully in that beam of light, everyone's listening, everyone's getting back to you. You can get real momentum going. So sometimes I do prefer just kind of being like, right, this is it, and we've got this amount of time, and let's do it.
The issue of AI, so the writers have been on strike because of AI, the actors are on strike because of AI. I spoke to a British composer earlier this year, and he was very concerned about it because he thought that, he cut his teeth in kind of British television doing kind of daytime stuff, and he says that is all going to be AI from now on. So young composers aren't going to get the chance. I just wondered whether you have thoughts about AI in music. Thoughts, Mark, Amelia?
I have many thoughts, but Amelia first.
I'm not sure. I mean, I agree with what you both just said, and I'm not essentially worried that I do think that there is something, and maybe this is very naive of me, that is the human connection that can't really be replicated. And I guess I'm hopeful that maybe there might be a way of AI being a tool for composers and being of use, and there might be a world where, like we say, sometimes it's really hard to communicate with directors, and you're having to get someone in to record something and mock something up, and actually you could just be like, AI, do me a bluegrass version of da-da-da, or give me a sample of this and let's just do it, and you can have it instantly there for somebody to hear and go that, so. And I do think maybe people with bigger teams, maybe some of that will start to be AI people, AI writing, and but I'm hopeful that it won't ultimately change our role and our art too much.
Mark, you seem to have.
So there's a film that's just been released, and I can't remember the name, but Hans actually did the score. Gareth Edwards was the director. The creator. So Gareth actually tried to use AI to score that film that was written about recently. He just sort of did it as a joke. And he tried to get AI to write the score in the style of Hans Zimmer. Then he realized it was maybe 6 out of 10 and he needed 11 out of 10, so he hired Hans. So I think that sort of summarizes what we're all saying here, in that unless you're training AI to compose like you as a shortcut for yourself somehow, rather than have an assistant do something, maybe. So I guess potentially assistants should be more worried than lead composers. And as Fabricio said, yes, part of the year I'm teaching a film scoring course, and I'm not teaching my students how to write like other composers. In fact, if they do, I say to them, you're clearly a fan of this composer and you sound like them, I want you to sound like you. So until AI can train itself to sound like nobody else, I don't think we've got anything to worry about. Right? I hope those aren't famous last words.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I write music outside of film music. I like to write choir music. And my point of difference there, I did a collaboration with the LA Choral Lab earlier this year. I was in a concert with them. They performed 3 of my choir pieces, 2 of which were for choir and electric guitar, and I performed with them. I can't see AI coming up with anything like that. So as long as we keep innovating and, you know, sounding like ourselves, I think we're okay.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. Amelia?
I just finished a film called Young Woman in the Sea, which is for Jerry Bruckheimer produced it for Disney. And
The Daisy Ridley
about,
thing.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's about the first woman to swim the Channel in 1926. So yeah, it's an amazing story. But I'm not sure. There's no release date yet, so sometime next year. Joachim Ronning, so he's a Norwegian director. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you very much, Mark, Amelia, Fabrizio, and Michelino. Good luck tonight, and thank you for chatting today.
I don't care who wins. You're all awesome. So I'll just applaud whoever.
This guy to win.
Jaws will win.